A war started on our ranch when a powerful HOA president decided our private road was her personal shortcut. My grandpa's weapon of choice? A cleverly engineered pit of mud. My grandpa's ranch isn't just a piece of land. It's a living, breathing part of our family history. Over 1,000 acres of rolling hills, ancient oak trees, and dusty cattle trails that have been worked by our family for 4 generations. I've spent every summer of my life here, and the place is etched into my soul. The smell of hay in the hot sun, the low grumble of Grandpa's old tractor, the infinite blanket of stars at night. Our property line is marked by a long, weathered wooden fence, a silent testament to decades of hard work and respect for boundaries. On the other side of that fence, for most of my life, there was nothing but more open land. Until last year. That's when the Meadowbrook Estates development went up. A soulless collection of identical, oversized beige houses crammed together on tiny, manicured lots. It was like a disease spreading over the landscape we cherished. With the new development came new people, city folks who wanted the country view without the country lifestyle. And with them came the HOA and its self-appointed queen, a woman we would come to know only as Karen. I first saw her car, a pristine white Range Rover that looked ridiculously out of place, a few weeks after people started moving in. I was helping Grandpa mend a fence post down by the main road. Our ranch has a long private dirt road that connects the main farmhouse to the highway, running parallel to the new development's ridiculously long and winding entrance. Our road is a straight shot, a perfect tempting shortcut. Suddenly, this white SUV barrels past us, kicking up a rooster tail of dust that coated us both. It didn't slow down, didn't wave, just flew past as if it owned the place. Grandpa just stood there, wiping his face with his sleeve, a storm cloud gathering in his usually clear blue eyes. He's a man of few words, my grandpa. He fought in Vietnam, and he carries a quiet, unshakable authority. He doesn't get angry easily, but when he does, it's like watching a mountain prepare for an earthquake. He just said, "Well, that's not going to happen again." The next day, he was waiting for her. He parked his big Ford F-250 right in the middle of the road and just stood there, arms crossed. When the Range Rover came roaring around the bend, it had to screech to a halt. Karen rolled down her window, her face a mask of annoyed impatience. She had the haircut, the designer sunglasses, the whole 9 yards. "Can you move your truck?" she demanded, not asked. "This is a private road, ma'am," Grandpa said, his voice calm and steady. "It's part of our ranch. You can't use it as a shortcut." She actually scoffed. A real, honest-to-goodness scoff. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. It's a road. I'm just trying to get home. Your driveway saves me like 10 minutes. It's not a driveway, and it's not for public use. The entrance to your community is a 1/4 mile down the highway," Grandpa explained, pointing. "I know where my entrance is," she snapped. "I'm the head of the homeowners association. I'm in a hurry. Now move." Grandpa didn't budge. He just looked at her. "I'm not going to tell you again. This is private property. Stay off it." He got in his truck and moved, assuming the point was made. He was wrong. The very next day she did it again. This time she laid on her horn as she flew past him working in the field. It was a declaration of war. We put up signs, big, professionally made signs that said, "Private property, no trespassing." We planted them deep in the ground at the start of our road. 2 days later, one of them was flattened, clear tire tracks running right over it. That was when Grandpa's quiet patience finally began to fray. He started talking about digging a trench, but Grandma talked him down, saying it was too aggressive. The breaking point came a week later. I was walking Buster, our old slow-moving golden retriever, near the road. I saw the white Range Rover coming, going way too fast. Buster, being partially deaf, didn't hear it and started to amble across the dirt path. Karen didn't slow down, not one bit. She swerved at the last second, missing him by inches, and I heard her scream out the window, "Get your stupid mud out of the road!" My heart was in my throat. I ran to Buster, who was just confused, not realizing he'd almost been turned into a hood ornament. I looked up and saw Karen's brake lights flash, and she actually backed up. She rolled down her window, her face twisted in rage. "You need to control your animal. If that thing had scratched my car, I would have sued you for every penny this dirt patch is worth." That's when Grandpa came out of the barn. He'd seen the whole thing. He walked slowly, deliberately, towards her car. He didn't say a word. He just stared at her. His face was a stone mask, but his eyes were blazing. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in Karen's face. She mumbled something about being late, rolled up her window, and sped off, kicking more dust onto my grandpa's boots. He stood there for a long moment, watching her disappear. Then he looked at Buster, then at me, then at the tire tracks in the dirt. He knelt down, picked up a handful of the rich, dark soil, and let it run through his fingers. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just found a solution. "Son," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Come with me. I've got an idea. She likes this road so much, we're going to make sure she remembers it. Permanently." He led me over to a low-lying spot on the road, a natural dip where rainwater always collected after a storm. Right next to it, hidden in the weeds, was a capped-off valve for one of the main irrigation lines that watered the far pasture. He pointed at the dip, then at the valve. "This part of the road has a clay base. Holds water real good," he said, that chilling smile never leaving his lips. "I think the ground here is looking a little thirsty." We spent the next 2 hours working under the late afternoon sun. Grandpa wasn't just digging a pit. That would be too obvious, too crude. His plan was a work of art, a masterpiece of passive aggression rooted in a deep understanding of the land. First, he had me use a post-hole digger to bore a series of deep, narrow holes across the width of the road in that low spot. They were about a foot apart, invisible unless you knew where to look. Then he uncoiled a long, thick hose from the irrigation valve. He jammed the end of the hose deep into one of the holes, then turned the valve just enough for a steady, gurgling flow of water to pour directly into the clay subsoil. "Clay's a funny thing," he said, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of a weathered hand. "On top, it can bake hard as a brick in this sun. But you get it wet underneath, and it loses all its backbone, turns to soup. All that weight from her fancy car is going to press down on that dry crust, and the whole thing's going to give way like a pie crust on a hot puddle of gravy." We moved the hose from hole to hole, letting each one drink its fill until the ground was completely saturated underneath. But the surface remained deceptively dry and dusty. It looked exactly the same as it had an hour before. A perfect, natural-looking trap. When we were done, he turned off the valve, coiled the hose, and hid it back in the weeds. He raked the dust over our footprints, smoothing the surface until it was pristine. To any passing eye, it was just a stretch of dirt road. But underneath, it was a quagmire waiting to happen. "Now we wait," he said, and we walked back up to the house. We sat on the front porch swing, a place usually reserved for quiet evenings with lemonade. But tonight, the air was electric. Grandpa had a pair of old military-issue binoculars. He didn't say much, just scanned the highway every so often. I could feel my heart thumping in my chest. Part of me was terrified we'd gone too far, that this would bring a world of trouble down on us. But a bigger part, the part that had seen Karen almost run over Buster, was buzzing with anticipation. Grandma came out and handed us both tall glasses of iced tea, a knowing look in her eye. She didn't ask what we'd been doing. She just said, "Supper's going to be a little late tonight. I have a feeling there might be a dinner show." Right around 5 o'clock, like clockwork, we saw it. The glint of the sun off a clean white windshield turning off the highway. "She's on approach," Grandpa said, his voice flat, like a spotter calling a target. I picked up the other pair of binoculars, my hands shaking slightly. I watched the Range Rover eat up the road, a plume of dust trailing behind it. She was going even faster than usual, as if to prove she couldn't be intimidated. She blasted past the mangled "No Trespassing" sign without a second glance. The car got closer and closer to the doctored stretch of road. My breath caught in my throat. "Steady now," Grandpa murmured, almost to himself. The front wheels hit the trap. For a split second, nothing happened. The SUV just kept moving forward. My stomach dropped. Did it fail? But then it was like watching it in slow motion. The front of the car didn't just dip, it sank. The momentum carried it forward a few more feet, the rear wheels lifting slightly before they, too, plunged into the unseen abyss of mud. There was a sickening, wet, sucking sound that we could hear even from the porch, followed by the deep thump of the vehicle's frame hitting the muck. The engine screamed as she stomped on the gas. The tires, designed for pristine asphalt, just spun uselessly, flinging great arcs of thick brown mud all over the pristine white paint job. The car rocked back and forth, digging itself deeper and deeper until it was well and truly buried up to its axles. The engine cut out. Silence. Then the driver's side door flew open. Karen emerged, and her shriek of pure, unadulterated rage echoed across the pasture. She was wearing white pants and some kind of fancy-looking sandals. Without looking, she stepped out, and her leg plunged into the mud up to her knee. She shrieked again, a higher, more desperate pitch this time, as she struggled to pull her foot out, losing a sandal in the process. She flailed, her arms pinwheeling, and ended up with both hands planted in the muck to keep from falling over completely. Grandpa lowered his binoculars. He took a long, slow sip of his iced tea. "Showtime," he said, and started walking calmly down the porch steps toward the road, with me right behind him. By the time we got there, Karen was a mess. She was smeared with mud. One leg of her white pants was soaked brown, and her face was a blotchy mess of fury and tears. When she saw us approaching, her expression curdled into pure hatred. "You!" she screeched, pointing a muddy, trembling finger at my grandpa. "You did this. I know you did. You sabotaged the road. I am going to sue you for everything you have. This is destruction of property. This is assault. I'm calling the police." She fumbled for her phone, her muddy hands smearing the screen. She finally managed to dial, and we could hear her screaming hysterically at the dispatcher about being trapped and attacked. Grandpa just stood there, his arms crossed, with a look of mild curiosity on his face. He waited for her to finish her tirade. When she finally hung up, breathing heavily, he simply gestured to the land around them. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "As I told you before, this is private property." He then pointed to the very clear, very official, no trespassing sign just 50 feet away. "And you are trespassing." Her face went from red to purple. She opened her mouth to scream again, but just as she did, a new sound cut through the evening air. It was a siren, growing steadily closer. A smug, triumphant smirk spread across Karen's muddy face. "Here they come," she spat. "You're going to jail, you old fossil." Grandpa didn't even flinch. He just gave her a small, tight smile. "Maybe," he said softly. "But they're not the only ones I called." The first to arrive was a county sheriff's deputy, a young guy named Miller, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He pulled up in his cruiser, lights flashing, and took in the scene. The half-swallowed Range Rover, the mud-caked and sputtering woman, and my stoic grandfather standing there like a statue. Karen immediately launched into her performance, waving her arms and screeching about how Grandpa had intentionally destroyed her car and created a dangerous hazard. "He dug a hole, officer. He's a menace. I could have been seriously hurt," she wailed, pointing an accusatory, mud-tipped finger. Deputy Miller sighed, took off his hat, and wiped his brow. He looked at the road. "Ma'am, I don't see any hole. It just looks like you drove into a mud patch." "It's a trap," she insisted. "He saturated the ground with water. Ask him. Make him tell you." Miller turned to my grandpa. "Sir, did you tamper with this road?" Grandpa just shrugged. "This is a working ranch, son. We move water around all the time. Sometimes pipes leak. Ground gets soft. It's the nature of the beast." He delivered the line with such folksy, homespun sincerity that it was almost believable. He then gestured to the no trespassing sign. "More to the point, what was this woman doing on my private road in the first place? I've told her repeatedly to stay off my property." The deputy's eyes darted between them, a flicker of understanding dawning on his face. He knew our family. He knew my grandpa wasn't some malicious troublemaker. He also clearly recognized Karen's type. "Ma'am," Miller said, turning back to Karen, his tone now a few degrees cooler. "Is it true you were warned not to use this road?" "It's a shortcut. It's a public nuisance for him to block it," she shrieked, her legal argument falling apart into pure entitlement. It's not a public nuisance if it's private property, Miller corrected her patiently. Technically, you're the one trespassing here. Just then, a second vehicle pulled up. It wasn't another police car. It was a big, heavy-duty tow truck from Miller's Towing and Recovery, the biggest outfit in the county. The driver, a bear of a man named Gus, who'd known my grandpa for 30 years, hopped out of the cab. Got a call about a Range Rover stuck in the mud, Frank? Gus bellowed, clapping Grandpa on the shoulder. Karen's eyes widened. You called a tow truck? She asked, a sliver of hope in her voice. I did, Grandpa said. Gus walked over, took one look at the half-submerged SUV, and let out a long, low whistle. Ooh-wee, she's in there deep. That's not a standard tow. That's a full-on recovery, ma'am. That's going to be pricey, especially for an emergency weekend call-out. Karen's face fell. Well, he's paying for it, she snapped, pointing at Grandpa again. His property damaged my car. Grandpa just chuckled, a low, dry sound. My property didn't damage your car, Mom. Your decision to trespass on it did. This is your bill. Gus pulled out a clipboard. He's right. Property owner ain't liable. I'm going to need a credit card from you before I even hook up the winch. He named a price that made Karen's jaw drop so far it nearly hit the mud. It was clearly a friends and family discount for Grandpa, inflated for her. While she was sputtering about the cost, a third vehicle arrived. This one was a news van from the local TV station. A reporter I recognized, a bubbly young woman named Jessica, hopped out with a cameraman in tow. Frank, you rascal, she called out to my grandpa. My editor got a tip about an HOA president getting stuck in a mysterious mud pit while trespassing on a local ranch. Said it might make a good human interest story. Is that you? She asked Karen, pointing her microphone in her direction. Karen's face went completely white. She was no longer a furious victim. She was a deer in the headlights. The camera was rolling, capturing her in all her muddy, disheveled glory. My grandpa, meanwhile, had transformed into the very image of a dignified, long-suffering landowner. We've been having a terrible problem with people from the new development cutting through our land, Jessica, he said, his voice laced with weary resignation. It's a danger to our animals and a real privacy issue. I've put up signs, I've asked politely. I just don't know what else to do to protect my property. He looked so reasonable, so wronged. It was a masterclass in public relations. The camera swung back to Karen, who was trying to shield her face. The deputy was writing her a ticket for trespassing. The tow truck driver was standing over her with a credit card machine. Her perfect manicured world was collapsing in a puddle of wet clay on a news broadcast that would be all over the county by 10 p.m. She was utterly defeated, humiliated. After paying Gus an astronomical sum and getting her ticket, she finally had her mud-caked SUV pulled from the pit. It looked pathetic, dripping brown sludge from its undercarriage. She wouldn't even look at us. She got in, slammed the door, and drove away, the long way, leaving a trail of muddy water behind her. We watched her go, the news van and the tow truck pulling out behind her. The deputy gave Grandpa a nod before leaving. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. A quiet satisfaction settled over the pasture. Well, Grandpa said, finally breaking the silence, I don't think she'll be coming back. We walked back to the house and Grandma had a feast waiting for us. We ate on the porch, watching the last of the light fade. It felt like a victory. But as I was helping clear the table, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Another set of headlights turned off the highway and started down our road. It wasn't a Range Rover. It was a large, dark-colored pickup truck, one I didn't recognize. It drove slowly, cautiously, stopping right at the edge of the now obvious mud pit. A man got out. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was big, burly, and in the fading light, I could just make out a logo on his shirt. Meadowbrook Estates, Security. He stared at the mud trap, then looked directly up the hill towards our house, and then his phone rang. He answered it, and even from that distance I could hear Karen's shrill, furious voice on the other end, echoing in the quiet night air. He listened for a moment, then spoke in a low, gruff voice. Don't you worry, Mrs. Blevins, he said. We'll handle this. Grandpa saw the truck, too. He set down the stack of plates he was carrying and walked to the edge of the porch, his body silhouetted against the warm light of the house. He didn't say anything, just watched as the security guard finished his call, got back in his truck, and slowly, deliberately, backed all the way out to the highway. The threat was unspoken, but crystal clear. This wasn't over. Karen was deploying her own private army. For the next few days, an uneasy quiet settled over the ranch. Karen didn't come back, but the black security truck was a constant presence. It would park on the shoulder of the highway, just past our property line, a silent, brooding sentinel. The guard, a thick-necked guy who always wore sunglasses, would just sit there, watching. It was unnerving. It felt like we were under surveillance. Grandpa tried to ignore it, going about his chores as usual, but I could see the tension in the set of his jaw. The HOA's next move was an official-looking letter delivered by certified mail. It was a cease and desist order, penned by a high-priced law firm. It accused Grandpa of creating a malicious and dangerous public nuisance and demanded he immediately fill and restore the roadway to a safe, passable condition. It was filled with legal jargon, but the message was clear. Fill the hole, or we'll see you in court. Let 'em, was all Grandpa said, tossing the letter onto the kitchen counter. It's my road. I'll make it as passable or impassable as I damn well please. But Karen wasn't just relying on lawyers. 2 days after the letter arrived, the real escalation began. I woke up to the sound of our cattle bellowing in distress. We ran down to the pasture that bordered the Meadowbrook estates and found a 20-foot section of our fence had been cut clean through. The cattle were wandering out towards the development's perfectly manicured lawns. It took us half the morning to round them up and fix the fence. There was no proof, of course, but we knew who was behind it. The security guard just watched from his truck, a smug look on his face. That was the last straw for Grandpa. His fight was no longer just about a shortcut. It was about defending his home, his livelihood. He disappeared into his workshop for the rest of the day. The sounds of welding and grinding echoed out of the barn. When he finally emerged that evening, he had a look of grim determination. He'd fabricated 4 of the biggest, meanest-looking steel posts I'd ever seen, each one topped with a sharp, 3-pronged point, like a medieval caltrop. "They want a passable road," he said to me, his voice low and gravelly. "Fine, but it's going to be passable on my terms." The next morning, before the sun was even fully up, we were out there with the tractor and a post-hole auger. We dug 4 deep holes at the entrance to our road, just off the highway. We filled them with concrete and sank those massive steel posts deep inside. Then Grandpa welded a thick, heavy-duty chain between 2 of them and hung a brand-new, even bigger sign, "Private Ranch Road, absolutely no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted." For the final touch, he installed a heavy-duty padlock on the chain. Our road was officially sealed. It didn't take long for the response. Karen's black truck screeched to a halt in front of our new gate. The security guard got out, saw the setup, and immediately got on the phone. A few minutes later, Deputy Miller's cruiser pulled up again. Karen arrived shortly after in a different car, a pristine black Lexus this time, looking furious. She marched right up to the gate. "You can't do this," she yelled at Grandpa. "This is an access road. You're blocking access." "Access for who?" Grandpa asked calmly. "It's my road, on my land, leading to my house. The only person who needs access is me, and I've got the key." He held up the padlock key and jingled it. "This is a violation of county ordinances," she stammered, clearly grasping at straws. Deputy Miller stepped forward. "Actually, ma'am, it's not. I checked with county planning after our last visit. This road is deeded private, not an easement. He's within his rights to gate it off completely." Karen's face turned a shade of mottled red I'd never seen before. She was beaten. The law was on our side. The news story had made her a local laughingstock. Her shortcut was gone forever. She glared at Grandpa, her eyes filled with pure, impotent rage. "This isn't over," she hissed, a hollow threat from a queen who'd lost her kingdom. She spun on her heel, got back in her Lexus, and sped away. The security guard, looking utterly defeated, got in his truck and followed her. We never saw them again. The security truck disappeared from the highway shoulder. The angry letters stopped coming. The only sign of the Meadowbrook estates was the distant view of their beige rooftops over the hill. My grandpa had won. He hadn't just stopped a trespasser, he'd defended his land, his family, and his way of life with a shovel, some water, and a backbone forged from generations of hard work. A few weeks later, Grandpa and I were sitting on the porch swing, watching the sunset. The mud trap had long since dried up, leaving a permanent-looking dip in the road behind our new gate, a silent monument to the battle that was fought, and won. "You know," Grandpa said, breaking the comfortable silence, "that mud was good for the soil? Think I might plant some wildflowers in that spot next spring." He smiled, a genuine happy smile this time, and in that moment I knew the ranch was more than just safe. It was home, and no HOA Karen in the world was ever going to change that.